In Latin America's prisons are overcrowded and violent, and some are getting worse. Berta Garcia looks, in her fleece, like a hiker passing through Latacunga, an Andean town 19 kilometers south of Quito, the capital of Ecuador. But Miss Garcia is not here for the country's spectacular volcanoes. Latacunga is also home to a prison where 27 inmates died in riots in 2021. It was here, in a jail run by drug gangs, that her 74-year-old husband was sent after being convicted in absentia of embezzlement. He has cancer but had to sleep on the floor in an overcrowded cell. He was beaten up. After 3 months, Miss Garcia got him transferred to a lower security prison. But by then, incarceration had already taken its toll. He is very skinny. He's aged a lot, she says, as she visits the jail to pick up his medical files. In the America, 376 out of every 100,000 inhabitants are behind bars, more than twice as many as in any other region. Historically, that rate has been pushed up by the United States, which has one of the highest incarceration rates in the world, 629 people per 100,000. Other countries are now starting to catch up. In the 2 decades since 2000, the prison population in Central and South America has surged by 77% and 200%, according to the World Prison Brief, a database maintained by Birkbeck University of London. Latin America's prisons have little funding. In 2021, the average spent on an inmate in a state prison in Brazil, which has the third largest prison population in the world, was $4,000 a year. That is about a tenth of the average spent in the United States. And the pandemic has worsened matters, increasing overcrowding and violence. Since December 2020, over 200 Ecuadorians have been killed because of gang warfare in prisons. In June last year, 53 prisoners were killed in a riot in Colombia. In a region with high crime rates, citizens have long favored the leaders, treating suspect criminals with mano dura, or an iron fist. The most extreme example of this is in El Salvador. In March 2022, a state of emergency was declared by President Nayib Bukele after a spike of gang-related killings. Some 100,000 people, or 2% of Salvadorian adults, are now behind bars. The country's homicide rate has halved. Mr. Bukele's approval rating is a whopping 90%, the highest in the region. But the problem is that Latin American prisons offer little rehabilitation. Fewer than half of prisoners have access to work or education, and programs that exist tend to be infrequent and short-term. As prison populations started to soar in the 1990s, reformist types who envisioned prisons as places for state-sponsored re-education were disappointed, says Giannis Silvestre of the University of Sao Paulo. Instead, it seemed that prisons are just a place to put undesirables. Few countries keep records on recidivism, and different ways of measuring reoffending make them tricky to compare. but the data that exist are discouraging. In Brazil, according to a 14-year study published last year, or more than 900,000 former prisoners convicted of drug crimes, violent crimes, and theft, 1 in 5 ended up back in prison within a year, and nearly 40% within 5 years. In the United States, 45% of former inmates return to prison within 5 years, either on a new conviction or for violating the terms of their parole. Overcrowding means that many prisons are simply cages. The World Prison Myth estimates that Brazilian and Bolivian prisons are operating at 147% and 264% of capacity, respectively. Inmates report not receiving medical care. According to the World Health Organization, a Salvadorian in prison is 99 times more likely than the national average to have tuberculosis. Another consequence of overcrowding is violence. In some prisons, the authorities work in tandem with inmates. Others are running entirely by prisoners, with staff guarding only the perimeter. At the extreme end are the Venezuelan prince or kingpins. They control 46% of the prison population, while state authorities govern 11%. The rest is under mixed control, according to the Venezuelan Prison Observatory. This is the consequence of a policy from the 2010s, when Iris Valera, the prisons minister, realized that the state alone could not control prison violence. She abdicated responsibility to the prince, who built this courthouse, swimming pools, and zoos. In Ecuador, where the government says that over a third of inmates belong to a criminal organization, there is one prison guard for every 62 inmates. In the United States, that ratio ranges from 1 to 4 or 1 to 14. Outnumbered and underpaid, they sometimes join the gangs they're supposed to control. In recent years, Ecuador has been hit by a wave of murderers orchestrated by gang bosses behind bars. In the first 8 months of 2020, the number of homicides doubled compared with the same period of previous year. The gangs that hang bodies of bridge were born in the prison, says Renato Rivera, a researcher. The Mexicanization of a region. Some countries are trying to change. Of 25 Latin American countries, 6 have reduced their prison populations since 2018, according to the World Prison Brief. In Ecuador last year, Guillermo Lasso, the president, announced plans to free 5,000 prisoners and hire more guards. Some prisoners were displeased with these plans. In November, in an apparent response to the transfers of gang bosses to higher security prisons, gangsters in Guayaquil, Ecuador's second largest city, threw explosives at petrol stations, police stations, and a hospital, killing 5 police officers and a civilian. Such violence may make it hard to persuade society of the value of freeing less dangerous prisoners.